Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the FitMAW Show. I am your host, Jason Craig. Hope you all had an amazing week, and we've got to be kicking it off with part two of what I should eat. Now, last week we did a lot of in-depth information. You guys saw the difference between living foods and also dead foods. And in tonight's episode, we're going to be taking that up a next level. Because, like I said, there is so much information in this that we just can't do it all in one show. So, in an effort to ensure that we bring you as much information that you can make an informed decision, I'm going to be having these in different parts. All right, I hope you are cool with that. Now, before we even continue, where is my audience signing from? I know we got folks here from Trinidad, Grenada, Barbados, St. Vincent, St. Lucia, Antigua, all the way in North America, and sometimes over in the UK. So just drop in the comments where you're signing from. I always like to know where my audience are coming from. And it's always great to have you. Welcome aboard. And if you're watching us for the first time, if you're joining us for the first time, then it is definitely a pleasure having you. For all returning guests, it's always great having you here. Now, if you're watching us on YouTube, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so that you can also be the first notified when we have new videos. Also, it helps us to grow the channel so that we can meet more influential people and get more information and bring it over to you. So do us a favor, hit us that like button and also that notification bell on YouTube. For those of you on Facebook, go ahead and hit the follow or like button, and that again helps us to grow with the algorithm there. So we're going to be taking this thing off tonight. I don't plan to be here too long. I actually just want to get information out and make sure that you ladies have a nice early night tonight, and more importantly, put it in such a way that you can apply it. You can apply it into your everyday life. So first, again, before I continue, welcome on, welcome all. Great to have you. We're going to be kicking this thing off. Now, what should I eat? This question is one of them that we get a lot here in the fitness community because, as you know, there are so much information, and in some cases, so much misinformation as to what you should eat, right? And my goal here tonight is to clear it up so you guys can have a broad perspective. You can understand food, the categories of food, what food does to you, how do you apply this into your knowledge, what foods are in your local, because it's one thing for me to tell you foods are great, but if these foods are not in the country that you're living in, then what is the purpose of all this? So I'm going to be showing you all of these things as we go in here tonight. A core principle that we always like to start off with, and if you've done any training, it's something that I use personally, and then I impart that in the information that I send out to my clients. And that is the principle that is taken from the Bible that says, know ye not that your body is a temple of the Holy Ghost which is in you. So that is the driving principle. And knowing that your body is a temple, a holy place for the Holy Ghost to dwell in, then what sort of condition would you want your body to be in? Let's bring it to a little bit more of a practical example. We go to the church, right? Most of us go to church or some sort of a religious building where we go to worship. Now, with that building, is that a place you want to be seeing garbage? You want to be seeing children playing up and down, toys on the floor, walls unpainted, trash not thrown out, flies falling? Or is it a place you want to be clean, organized, tidy, the ambience, the air is fresh, the scent is pleasing to the nose? If you are like most persons, then you are obviously going to opt for the latter. So if we can envision this, a religious building, being in its finest state, because it is a place of worship, because it is a place of reverence, then this is also a similar attitude we have to take when it comes to our body. We have to remember that our body is also a temple. And we want that temple to be in such a condition that the Holy Spirit can come and work within us. Now, if you're not religious or you are not of that persuasion, then that's fine too, right? But remember, this is the only body you have to live in during your duration here on earth. And the things that you put in will determine the quality of life that you will experience in this body, right? So it is up to you as an individual to determine what quality of life do I want to enjoy. Think of your car, right? You've got your car. You can decide, hey, I'm going to be keeping the maintenance schedule. I'm going to be changing my oil on time. I'm going to be ensuring that my tires are always checked. I'm going to be ensuring that every 6 months I do a proper engine check and I follow the maintenance schedule. I'm going to be ensuring that I keep the car clean. You know, all of these things that we do in our vehicle. And when we do these things, they last long. Or you can decide, hey, I'm just going to wing it. You know what I mean? When I feel like I'll change the oil, if I get time, I'll clean it. The tires, there's some treads coming out, but hey, it can probably take a couple more kilometers. So I'm just going to run it down, right? If it's broken, then I'll just call the mechanic to deal with it. And as fictitious a story as this may sound, this is the exact same attitude persons take with their body. You know what I mean? I'm just going to have fun. YOLO, right? You only live once, twice. You only live once. Sorry, you only live once, right? Everybody got that YOLO thing going on right now, which I think is extremely dangerous, by the way. Anyway, and because you only live once, twice, I'm going to go all out, pedal to the floor, and just wing it. If anything goes wrong, I'm going to check the doctor and get some medications, we'll roll with it again. Now, the only sad part about this is that when most persons realize the folly of such a thinking is normally when it's too late. When they're sitting in their bed, when they're ridden with cancer, when they are living off chemo and radiation and constantly have to be on medication, prescription after prescription, that is when they say, hey, if I had known, then I would have. But why wait until you're in that state to make a change, to reform your principles of eating, living, rest, these things? Why not learn from persons who have already gone through that path? Why not use that as your example, as your, if you want to call it, goal as to what not to attain to? And that is what I desire here to impress upon you tonight, to show you the two paths, right? I'm going to show you the two ways, and I want you to make a decision, but at least I'm going to give you all of the information so that when you do make a decision, it is an informed decision. It's not something that you are saying that, hey, Jason said, or something you read in a book. I'm giving you the data. I always encourage you to go and cross-check the information, research it for yourself, make sure that I'm not talking fluff here, and then when you have both, you make your decision, right? And with that said, I want to focus a little bit more on the dark side of food, right? The dark side of food. In last week's lecture, or in last week's show, we spoke about living foods and dead foods. Living foods, foods that breathe life. Dead foods are living foods that fall into the hand of man, gone through rigorous processing, and they have brought it to an edible state, right? Now, there are certain things that are hidden in foods, and some of these you will come across as you start to examine the ingredients list on different packages in your kitchen, right? And what you are going to realize is that all of these foods are intended to raise your desire for them. Because if your desire is raised, you will not just buy them once, but you will become a repeat buyer. And repeat buyers is how businesses grow. The first one on the list is one that we are all familiar with. And of course, I'm going to always like to have my notes here so that when I am speaking, I always have something to refer back to. And the first one that we're going to be speaking about is MSG, or monosodium glutamate. Now, it's a very popular food, especially in Chinese restaurants, in seasonings, in spices, these sort of stuff. And what monosodium glutamate does, or MSG, it actually acts like a seasoning. However, unlike salt that increases the saltiness of food, monosodium glutamate acts through a different pathway in that it increases the desire or the taste you get from the food. So it tricks your brain into thinking the food tastes a lot better, right? And you can see this being tested if you do use monosodium glutamate. It's also found in one of our packages here in the Caribbean called Maggi. Maggi has a lot of monosodium glutamate. And you can try your food before adding Maggi and after, right? So it enhances the taste. So it actually increases the sensitivity of your taste buds. So the food actually tastes better. It hasn't really added nothing like, you add salt and you make it a little more salty, you add sugar, it doesn't do anything like that. It actually increases the sensitivity of your taste buds so the food tastes better. Now, you might suggest, well, what's the big issue with increasing the sensitivity? Well, to be honest with you, if that's all that it did, then it really wouldn't be much of an issue. It would be perfect because then it could take average cooks like me and help them to augment the taste of their food by just adding a touch to it. Unfortunately, it goes a little bit deeper than that, right? And what the research has shown is that the research confirms that MSG consumed by lab animals, when you do it with lab animals, it actually causes brain lesions of the hypothalamus, right? And the neuroscientists generally agree that the glutamic acid that is present in the monosodium glutamate is a neurotoxic and kills neurons by exciting them to death. The very young, get this, the very young are most susceptible. And then here's the worst part. MSG may damage your hypothalamus, which the hypothalamus is responsible for your appetite. And if that is damaged, you can end up in a case with a runaway appetite. So the question may be asked, with that being said, why do manufacturers put MSG in the food? Well, it's simple. If I can get you to become addicted to my food, then you are going to buy it again and again and again, and you're going to support my business, right? And I'm going to be able to grow. So that is a reason why they add these to their food. Our next question you might be asking, Jason, don't they know this? Of course they know this, but the goal is not to make you healthy. The goal is to make a profit. Generally, we're talking about the big food lines. We're not talking about it, but there are some specific food lines like these organic food lines. They actually do care about your health, right? So I wouldn't make that as a general claim to all food manufacturers. But I'm talking about the big chain food manufacturers, right? Their goal is to actually make a profit. So this is something that you have to be very careful of. And a very prominent source of MSG is Chinese foods, right? And there's actually something called the Chinese restaurant syndrome. And it's normally diagnosed when people, after eating Chinese food, start to experiencing some of the symptoms like stomach cramp, rapid heartbeat, shortness of breath, etc. Right? So some people have like really high intolerances to MSG, but Chinese food in general has a lot of MSG. As fact, a lot of the Asian foods, you look like places like Vietnam, they're loaded with MSG, right, to increase the taste and the flavor of the food, right? So it actually tastes a lot better for you. And if you eat all the Chinese, you must be very careful with that. You must be very careful with that because the last thing you want to do is to excite your neurons to death and worse off, damage your hypothalamus, right? Especially if you're looking to lose weight and tone up. This is not something you want. The appetite is the last thing you want to run away. right? So that is something you have to be very careful of. I'm just going to give you some of the foods that are or contains MSG that you may not think about, right? So of course, glutamate, as the name would suggest, glutamic acid, MSG of course, texturized protein, hydrolyzed protein, calcium caseinate, sodium caseinate, yeast extract, yeast foods, and gelatin. Now, these ingredients often contain MSG or are created during the MSG process. So for these ones I'm going to read in here, these are some of them that contains it directly or during the process of them, while you're making them, MSG is added. And they're like seasonings, of course, as you would expect, vegetable beet stock, broth, soy protein. When you see this word natural flavors and flavorings, and I'll do a whole topic on that, and it's like one of the most deceptive things on the back of the ingredients. Natural flavorings and flavors, right? That is like a nice way of putting dangerous chemicals in your foods legally, right? So cornstarch is also one, whey protein, soy sauce. This is the next one, artificial flavors and flavorings, powdered milk, ultra pasteurized ingredients, just to name a few. So these are some of the things that actually contains MSG, and you really want to start paying attention. You want to know exactly what you put in your body. Don't leave it to chance. So when you pick up foods at the grocery, when you pick up packages that you're going to be using in your culinary designs, look at the back, look at the ingredients, and see if you're seeing things like these names that we've called. Or some of them will just plain out say MSG, right? Monosodium glutamate. So look at this, and in your kitchen now, you can probably go in your kitchen after this show and check out some of the ingredients and see where you find it showing up, right? Now, next one of the dark foods that is added is high sugar foods and beverages. And if you have looked at these foods recently that are supposed to be natural, they are loaded with sugars and added sugars. Especially what really gets me is some foods that are supposed to be for kids. I mean, it is supposed to be a kid's drink, a kid's fruit drink. It is loaded with added sugars. Now you wonder, why would they put all of that sugar in a child's drink? Children are naturally highly energetic. Why would you want to add that extra to them? And of course, when it doesn't make any sense, there's probably a buck in it, right? So you have to be extremely careful of refined sugar and these things that they add in them. And the reason is, if you have missed a couple of episodes, sugar can actually make you fat. And it does this because it stimulates the pancreas to release insulin. And insulin is a storage hormone. Insulin is released in the body. It tells the body to stop burning and start storing. And the more insulin levels are elevated, the more your body is going to be in a fat storage mode. So if you are consuming a lot of high sugar foods, especially those refined processed sugars, you are going to be finding that it seems like the effort that you are putting out in terms of trying to eat healthy and work out is just going in vain. Because your blood sugars are always elevated, your insulin levels as a result will be elevated, and finally your body will just be in constant storage mode, right? So that is something to be careful of. The next thing is that sugar actually impairs your immune system. And in a time like such that we live in now, the last thing you want to do is to impair your immune system, which is why when a kid is sick, or you yourself are sick with E. coli, the first thing you want to do is cut sugar out completely, because it gives your immune system the full force it needs to go into action without being interrupted by sugar, right? Now, sugar also leads to osteoporosis, and the reason for this is especially important for ladies over 50. And the reason sugar does that, because sugar creates an acidic environment in your body. And then what your body does, because your body always tries to maintain balance, in an effort to maintain the balance and bring the alkalinity back into the body, it pulls calcium from the bone to do that. And when calcium is pulled, then of course the bone structure now becomes compromised. The more times this happens, you can see where this will eventually lead. Now, sugar also aggravates yeast problems. If you find you get another yeast infection, check your sugar intake. And that could probably be a reason why that. Sugar also increases or speeds up the aging process. So if you try to look young, keep the sugar down. Hey, I could actually rap. If you're trying to look young, keep the sugar down, right? So that's just something you always want to be careful of. And then there are the different forms of sugars like aspartame, sucralose, and again, these are artificial sweeteners. As much as possible, you want to avoid these things. You can get your sugar from more natural sources. Yes, agave syrup, that's a good one. The next one is, I just bought it recently. It's a natural sweetener. Honey is also good. Honey is also really good. Beet products in general are really good for consumption. And I'm trying to remember the name of the one that we bought recently. Anyway, it's going to come to me at some point. So you want to be very careful of these things. Splendor, so these natural sweeteners, these artificial sweeteners, sorry, that also contains sucralose. And again, pretty much most of these artificial sweeteners, high sugars, refined sugars, has a similar effect. So the more you consume these things, the greater your chances of developing some of these things that we spoke about. And listen, I'm gonna be realistic. I know at all times it might not be practical to just cut it out altogether, but at least all I'm asking you to do is limit it. So you know right off the bat, like all of these sodas, sweet drinks, the popular colas, and the Pepsis, the Sprite, Arizona, whatever it's called, Chubby, Buster. A lot of these things have these added sweetness in them. And if you're consuming this every day, well, God forbid, I hope you're not consuming it every day. But if you're consuming this every day, then you're really not doing a great benefit to your body, right? So just keep that in mind as we go along. And next thing you have to be very careful of, and the next one of those foods that kind of slip in there, and they look innocent on the surface, but when you really dig in, they're actually very dangerous for you. And that's the white flours and their derivatives, so like white crackers, these kind of stuff, white bread, etc. Pastries, cakes, etc. Because here how it works, right? In nature, everything starts as a whole grain. And the whole grain has the bran, the germ, and the endosperm. The endosperm that's inside, right? What they do in the process then, they take off the bran, they take out the germ, and they just refine the endosperm, right? They just break it down. Now, you say, Jason, well, still the endosperm, what's wrong with that? Part of the process that they go through while doing that, and I'll tell you what's wrong with that shortly, is that they actually, when it's finished, when they do that, it's actually a grayish color. And to get it looking pretty or white for you to eat, they actually bleach it. So imagine the chemicals you're using to bleach that flour back so it looks white. So actually, when it started, it looks great, but to get it back, we actually bleach it, right? And then they add back at the end of the process vitamins and minerals and these stuff. So that's why it's called enriched white flour, right? Now here's the problem with that. Because the bran and the germ is removed, the bran and germ act like the fiber, right? And when these are intact, let me show you what happens when they're intact first, and then I'll show you what happens when they're removed. When they are intact, it hits the digestive system. Because these are on top, the body has to go through this, and then you get in the endosperm being gradually released, turning into glucose, right? Gradually broken down. When you take these off, it's like sucking a candy. There's no protection, there's no protective layer. So it's get absorbed directly into your bloodstream. It shoots your insulin levels up, or your blood sugar levels up, which shoots your insulin levels up. And we go back to that problem what we're talking about, where when the insulin levels are high, your body goes into fat storage mode. Now you do this frequently enough. So if you're constantly eating white bread, sugar has the same effect. If you're constantly eating this, you're constantly spiking your blood sugar, you're constantly raising your insulin. At a certain point, your body is going to start to become insulin resistant because, and it's a defense mechanism. Your body don't want to be always having these spikes. So it makes the cells less receptive to insulin. So let's just use numbers. If it took one key to open a cell and allow the glucose in, when you do this more, it's going to take 2 keys, then 3 keys, then 4 keys. So you're now having 4 parts of insulin doing what one used to normally do. As a result, your body becomes more resistant. That's why it's called insulin resistant to insulin, and you need more insulin to get the same job done. When this continues, you eventually develop what is called type 2 diabetes, right? So you see where this go? So if you're constantly consuming white sugar, you're constantly spiking your blood sugar and insulin levels, done over a long enough period, especially with something in your family line, you can also develop insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes. Added to that, we haven't even talked about the weight gain aspects, which, I mean, that is non-debatable. Most persons know that you're on a weight gain diet, just cutting out bread alone, right? I'm not telling you to cut out bread, but just cutting out bread alone, you're going to see a dramatic drop in your weight. If you're somebody eating a lot of bread, just cutting out bread, you haven't done anything else, you're going to start to see your weight going down. So what does that tell you about the effect of white bread on your body, right? And this also is an important part. When you take white flour, and you should try it, when you finish mixing it in the bowl, how does it look on the sides of the bowl? It's sticky, right? You can actually use it as a glue to stick paper. How do you think it looks when it goes in your stomach and you consume it? The exact same thing. So you're having this, that is why you're having people with indigestion and constipation. If you find yourself constantly feeling these issues, indigestion, constipation, bloating, then you probably should check the consumption of your white flour and these refined goods. So be very careful with that. Fast foods, again, these are something you want to limit. I'm not going to be hard and fast that don't eat fast foods at all, but just limit, because the main thing with fast foods is that they're high in trans fat. And trans fat has been linked to heart diseases and also cancers. Plain simple, plain blank. I'm going to leave that right there. All right? This is also a tricky one, and this was something I got caught with earlier when I started on the fitness journey, right? And the meats. So we're talking about things like the sausages. For those of you who are Adventists, then we're talking about turkey sausages or chicken sausages, turkey, bacons, that kind of stuff, right? But these meats in general, these are what we call processed meat. In the processing, they have something called nitrites or nitrates, right? Nitrates are known as carcinogens, which are substances that may cause cancer. They are also loaded with saturated fats, which we know lead to, and we are talking about the healthy saturated fats, which we know can lead to arteriosclerosis or clogging of the arteries and other heart-related diseases, right? Now, this is the strange part, because as a child, I ate these stuff, and I didn't know this. But you want to be especially careful giving processed meats, so sausages, hams, bacons, to children. Let me show you why. One study found that children who ate more than 12 hot dogs, in this case using hot dogs, a month, have 9 times the risk of developing childhood leukemia. Children who ate more than 12 hot dogs per month have 9 times the risk of developing childhood leukemia. You say, Jason, I don't give my child 12 hot dogs per month. True. But just divide it and then go by the ratio and see how much times you're increasing the child's chance of getting leukemia. And that's some of the dangerous thing of nitrates. Now, there are nitrate-free, but I've never seen them in the Caribbean, so I'm not sure, maybe in your country you may find some. But the mainline sausage companies, they don't have them. That's just what I found, all right? So be very, very careful with that and in the consumption of that. And with that being said, you might be asking, then if I should limit these foods and use some of the dark foods, then what should I really be eating? It goes back to last week. If you eat more foods that are found in the natural state, the foods that we have here, your fruits, your vegetables, your ground provisions, your nuts, your seeds, these are going to be better off, because let me just show you contrast. With the vegetables are loaded with fiber, soluble fiber, insoluble fiber, right? With foods that are high in soluble fiber, they tend to promote cholesterol lowering effects. They also tend to impart more bowel movement, so reduce that constipation you're probably constantly having. They also are better for blood sugar levels because of the fiber. A little bit of that is broken down at time, and you're having these high spikes. High spikes means, or no high spikes means, low insulin levels, also which means your body will not be in a constant fat storage mood, And doing that for too long, of course, you will be led to type 2 diabetes, right? So if you want to just put this into one word, the foods found in nature are packaged in a way that it is designed to complement your body. But that's not one word, that's like one sentence. The food in nature were designed for your body, right? The creator designed them in such a way, packaged them in such a way that when they hit your body, they will actually complement you and not take away from what you're trying to do. So if you could eat as much more natural foods as possible, that's perfect. You say, Jason, you expect me to eat grains and salads all day? No, I'm not expecting you to eat grains and salads all day. Definitely not, right? But if you can add a few more grains into your food, if you can add a few more vegetables into your food, if you can add a few more fruits into your day, that'd be awesome. If you could just reduce your processed foods, that would be better, right? And that is what I really encourage. That's what I want you to do. You guys, we in the Caribbean, we're fortunate. We are surrounded with food growing all over. All over the country has foods, right? And a lot of these natural, native foods are cheap. You can find them at your local market. So try and add these into your day. And for those of you who eat meat, if it is possible, try and eat meat from a local butcher. So like somebody who's local, you know the man tying his cow out, eating normal grass, eating the neighbor fence. That is what you want. I'm exaggerating with the neighbor fence, right? Right, so you want that because that is what you call free range eating organic raised animal, right? The same thing if you know somebody have chickens and you're feeding them organic food, you want that. You want to limit that imported meat, worst off the processed meat, and make sure that those are kept to zero to an absolute minimum, right? So if you eat this way, even though you're not eating a plant-based diet, and I'm not saying you have to eat a plant-based diet, I'll have that for our next subject, right? But you're still eating the meat, but you're getting your meats from organic sources. You're still having your foods, but you're getting them from organic sources. You're getting them as close to the natural state as possible. You know they were growing in St. Vincent or Grenada or Trinidad. You know they send them through the machine to package them for them to last for years, right? That is what you want. You want to know exactly what you're eating. You don't want to be guessing. You don't want to be, every time you pick up a label, you have to be looking to the back. Let me see what is in here now, right? That is no way to eat. That is not sustainable. That is not something you can do for the rest of your life because now eating becomes a burden. It's like you're playing cat and mouse. You're trying to dodge all of the dangerous chemicals and additives that's going to be taking you out, as opposed to just eating foods that you know, eating from animal meats that you know. Right, that's a lot easier, and that's what I'm trying to impart here to you. Try and eat foods that you know where they come from. If I want to bring this into one sentence, I could probably say that. Try to eat foods that you know exactly where they came from. Right? And if you don't know where they come from, cut them out or limit them significantly. And your life will be a lot better. Alright? So this has brought us to the end of this episode of the FitMAW show. It was definitely a pleasure hanging out with you. And again, we are going to be doing some big things this week, so look out for that. If you are new here, welcome. It was definitely a pleasure having you. And don't forget to share this video with your friends, with your family members who can use information. It really helps us to grow. And of course, you don't want to keep this information to yourself, right? So that they can also get the benefit that you are getting from this show. Until next week, same time, same place. Have yourselves an awesome week. I am your coach, Jason Craig, signing out.